a dollhouse locked with secrets. Dolly Bantry was restless in her seat. She leaned forward. "You must see it, Jane. You simply must." Marple sat quietly, her eyes steady, her hands folded neatly in her lap. She knew Dolly well. When Dolly's mind fixed on something, resistance was useless. Colonel Bantry cleared his throat. He had agreed to come, but showed no enthusiasm. He muttered about estate accounts and repairs. Still he followed his wife. Inspector Slack was already at the shop. Not in uniform, but his presence carried weight. "Security," he explained flatly. "Valuable pieces. Too much interest in them these days." Dr. Haydock joined later. He greeted Marple warmly. "The old eyes will be useful tonight," he teased. She smiled faintly but said nothing more. The Clements entered together, the Reverend polite, his wife chatty, both curious. They had heard about Ambrose Fallow's work and wanted to see it firsthand. Miss Mabel Finch followed, ink-stained hands, shy voice. She worked with papers and catalogues. "Documentation is important," she explained nervously. Marple nodded. She agreed. Small details always mattered. Young Lenny Pike hovered near the back, restless hands, quick movements. He worked with Fallow. He seemed proud, but also tense, almost protective of what they were about to see. Then came Mrs. Sybil Tarrant, tall, elegant, silver hair, sharp eyes. She carried herself like someone used to control, a collector with knowledge and opinions. She said little but observed everyone with quiet authority. Finally, Ambrose Fallow himself appeared. Spare frame, thin hair, hands that moved carefully. He greeted each guest politely, pride clear in his tone. He gestured toward the covered dollhouse. "It is ready," he said softly. 2 years of work, every detail exact, a piece of history reborn. Dolly clapped her hands together. "I told you, Jane. Isn't this thrilling?" Marple gave a small nod, her voice calm. "It sounds remarkable. Let us see." Ambrose's eyes narrowed. "Not yet," he said. "First some arrangements. There is something inside, a detail only I know, a secret waiting." His words drew attention. The room stilled for a moment. The guests leaned closer. A hidden detail in a dollhouse. The suggestion stirred curiosity. Lenny shifted uneasily. Mrs. Tarrant arched an eyebrow. Dr. Haydock frowned slightly. The Reverend whispered to his wife. Ambrose looked at them all. "You will see it in due time, but tonight I must finish one last adjustment. Precision matters. One mistake, and the entire effect is ruined." He lifted a small ring of keys. He stepped toward the side door. The workshop lay beyond it. Marple watched him, calm face. But her eyes followed every move. She always noticed what others missed. Ambrose turned the key. The lock clicked. He paused at the doorway. "Wait here. Enjoy your sherry. When I return, the surprise will be yours." The door closed firmly. The sound of the key turning echoed faintly in the hall. The guests exchanged quick glances. Dolly smiled brightly. Suspense! How delightful! But Marple's expression held a quiet unease. Secrets locked behind doors rarely ended well. The door stayed shut. Ambrose Fallow was alone inside. The tune begins. The host does not return. The guests stood near the dollhouse. Chatter faded, all eyes fixed on the miniature. The first notes rose, a thin melody, green sleeves, soft, steady, mechanical. Mrs. Clement clasped her hands. "How charming," she whispered. Her husband gave a nod but said nothing. Dolly Bantry leaned forward, her eyes shining. "It feels alive, Jane, doesn't it?" Marple tilted her head. She did not answer. Her gaze stayed on the locked door. Lenny Pike smiled nervously. "It's timed perfectly," he said. 10 minutes, not a second more." He spoke with pride, but his voice trembled. Inspector Slack checked his watch. 8:45, he muttered. He looked around. "Fallow said a few minutes. We'll see." Dr. Haydock sipped his sherry. His brow creased. "Strange that he left us waiting," he remarked. "Not his usual habit." Mrs. Tarrant stood rigid. Her silver hair gleamed under the light. She spoke coldly. "Collectors often dramatize. They think suspense adds value." Her eyes moved back to the dollhouse. The melody wound on, ticking clockwork beneath it, notes repeating, gentle but insistent. Time passed. 5 minutes, 6, 7. Colonel Bantry shifted his weight. He cleared his throat loudly. Odd business. He should be here. No answer from beyond the door. No footsteps. No movement. Marple's fingers tightened slightly on her bag, her expression unreadable, but her eyes never strayed from the keyhole. The Reverend tried to soothe the room. "Perhaps he is finishing a delicate repair. We should not disturb him." But his wife shook her head. "Ambrose is precise, too precise. He would not be late." The music continued. 8th minute, 9th minute. Mrs. Tarrant finally spoke again. "Perhaps he is testing the timing. Perhaps he wishes to show his cleverness." Her tone was sharp, uncertain. Marple whispered softly. "Or perhaps something else is happening." No one heard her clearly, but Dolly glanced her way, uneasy. The tune slowed, the spring winding down. A final note lingered. Then silence. The room stayed still. All waited, eyes turned toward the locked door. Slack frowned. He rapped his knuckles on the door. "Fallow, all right in there?" No answer. He rapped again, harder. "Your guests are waiting." Still silence. Mrs. Clement clutched her husband's arm, her voice low. "Why doesn't he answer?" Haydock set down his glass. "Something is wrong," he said firmly. "I feel it." The guests exchanged looks, confusion turning into tension, suspense heavy in the air. Marple leaned slightly forward, her voice calm but sharp. "He said precision matters, and now he is late." Her eyes fixed on the door. Then it came, a sudden sound, heavy, final, a crash. It echoed through the shop, wood striking wood, metal scraping. Everyone froze, every face pale, every eye on the locked door. The crash came again, louder, from Ambrose Fallow's workshop. Behind the locked door, silence hides horror. Inspector Slack raised his voice. "Fallow, can you hear me?" No reply. Colonel Bantry stepped closer. He tested the handle again, still locked. Slack nodded once. "Stand back." He braced himself. Bantry joined him. The door shook under their weight. Wood cracked. The lock strained. Another push. The door gave way. The room opened before them. Gasps filled the air. Dolly grabbed Marple's arm. Mrs. Clement turned away quickly. Ambrose Fallow lay on the floor, his head bent awkwardly. The dollhouse roof hung open above him, one brass stay loose, the other half fixed. Blood stained the polished boards beneath. Slack bent down first. He placed 2 fingers at the man's neck. He exhaled heavily. Gone. At least several minutes. Dr. Haydock pushed forward. He knelt, examined the wound carefully, his voice steady. "The edge of the roof struck him. Brass fittings are sharp. The angle is fatal." Mrs. Tarrant spoke coldly. "So it is over. A tragic mishap." Her voice carried finality. Too quick, too smooth. Lenny Pike shook his head violently. No, I fixed those stays myself. They don't just fall, they don't." His voice cracked. Miss Mabel Finch whispered. Perhaps a screw worked loose. But even she sounded unsure. Slack straightened. "Accident, nothing more. Old fittings, weak metal. That's all." He glanced at the group. "We will write it plainly in the report. Nothing suspicious. Colonel Bantry did not answer. He stood stiff, his jaw tight. But his silence said enough. Mrs. Clement clutched her husband's arm. It happened so quickly, right as the music stopped. Her husband tried to soothe her. His voice was thin. Marple had not spoken. She stepped closer now. Her eyes passed over the body. She studied the angle of the head, the fallen brass stay, the dollhouse table, and finally the small chimney rising from the miniature nursery. Her fingers hovered above it. She touched it lightly, then drew her hand back. Her eyes narrowed slightly. Her lips pressed together, a thought forming. She spoke softly. "The chimney. It is warm." The others turned. Slack frowned. "What of it?" "The lights run through the wiring. Heat spreads." Marple did not argue. She stepped back, her eyes still on the dollhouse, her expression unreadable. Dolly whispered, "Jane, what does it mean?" Marple did not answer at once. Her mind ticked like clockwork. She saw details no one else cared to see. The warmth was wrong, too wrong. A man dead, a roof fallen, an accident declared, but warmth in a chimney built for show. She drew a breath, her voice low, almost reflective. Accidents explain much, but not everything. Her hand hovered above the chimney once more. The warmth remained. One word, one false lead. The group stayed tense. Ambrose's body had been covered with a sheet. Inspector Slack ordered everyone back to the main table. Colonel Bantry muttered, "Best to clear the room, nothing more to see." But Marple remained still, her eyes on the dollhouse. Lenny Pike stepped closer. His hands shook. I should check if something's broken." He leaned down. Miss Finch spotted it first. "There, look. In the nursery. Something behind the cot." Lenny reached carefully. His fingers pulled out a scrap, a torn edge. Thin, stiff paper. The others crowded in. Slack grabbed it from him. He read the single word aloud. "Chimney." The room reacted at once. Mrs. Tarrant raised her chin. "So, the brooch. Of course, the famous Ariadne brooch, hidden there all along." Mrs. Clement gasped. "You mean it really was inside this dollhouse?" Her husband tried to calm her. Perhaps. Or perhaps only once. Lenny looked around nervously. "I never saw it. I never touched anything like that." Dr. Haydock folded his arms. Ambrose must have been writing a note. He wanted to record the location. Slack nodded. Makes sense. He planned a reveal tonight. Wrote chimney as a prompt. Then accident struck. Dolly's eyes sparkled with sudden excitement. "Oh, Jane, think of it. A jewel hidden in a chimney. A real treasure inside this tiny house." Marple's expression did not change. Her hands folded neatly in front of her. Her gaze moved from the scrap to the miniature chimney. She spoke softly. "One word can hold many meanings." Slack frowned. "It's simple. He wrote the clue. He died before he could show it. End of it." Mrs. Tarrant's voice cut sharp. "Then the brooch must be searched for at once. If it lies in the chimney, it must be removed, preserved, protected." Her eyes gleamed with authority, but Marple's voice interrupted. "It may be a false trail." Colonel Bantry raised an eyebrow. "Why false?" "The word says chimney. What else can it mean?" Marple looked at the paper again. The tear was jagged, edges uneven. She spoke carefully. "Why was it torn? Why left half hidden? If Ambrose wrote it, why conceal it?" Silence followed. The Reverend adjusted his glasses. "You suggest someone else planted it?" Marple's tone was measured. "I suggest someone wanted us to look one way, and not another." Mrs. Tarrant's lips tightened. "Speculation." Lenny swallowed hard. "I only found it. I didn't put it there." Marple gave him a small nod. "I believe you." Dolly whispered, "Then if it isn't a clue, What is it? Marple's gaze lingered on the chimney, her words quiet. Perhaps not a clue. Perhaps a distraction. Her eyes swept the room, every face uneasy. Every guest wondering who placed the scrap. She let the silence grow, then spoke with final weight. Or it points away from the truth. A wrong chair, a wrong hand. The group circled the dollhouse again. Slack ordered them to keep distance. Still Marple leaned closer. Her eyes moved slowly over each room. Her hand paused. She pointed to the drawing room. "That chair," she said quietly. Dolly blinked. "What about it, Jane?" Marple's finger rested against the glass. "The scale is wrong, too tall for the table beside it." Colonel Bantry squinted. "Looks ordinary to me." But Marple's tone was calm and firm. "It does not match the rest." Lenny Pike stepped forward quickly. His face flushed. He shifted from one foot to the other. "It was me," he blurted. "I made that one. I couldn't find the right piece." Mrs. Clement tilted her head. "You replaced it?" Lenny nodded, shame heavy in his voice. "I tried to copy the style. I thought no one would notice." Slack folded his arms. "Interesting. Very interesting." His eyes narrowed at the boy. "If you fake furniture, what else might you fake?" Lenny's hands shook. "Nothing else, only that chair. I swear it." Mrs. Tarrant's voice cut sharply. "Forgery is a habit. First a chair, then something more. That is the nature of it." Lenny turned red. "I'm no thief. I worked for Mr. Fallow. He trusted me." Dr. Haydock raised an eyebrow. "But Fallow is dead now. Trust is no proof." Miss Finch wrung her hands. "Poor boy. He only wanted the set complete." Her voice was soft, but unconvincing. The Reverend spoke carefully. "Skill can deceive. A wrong piece may hide a greater wrong." Slack seized on it. "Exactly. If he could slip a fake into the dollhouse, why not something else? A gem, a brooch, perhaps." The word hung in the air. Everyone thought of the scrap of paper. Everyone thought of the chimney. Lenny shook his head harder. "You've got it wrong. I didn't touch the brooch. I didn't even know it was real." Mrs. Tarrant's lips curved slightly. "Young men are often careless with the truth." Marple watched him closely, her eyes gentle but sharp beneath. She did not rush to defend him. Instead, she studied his shame. She spoke softly. "Why confess so quickly? Lenny, you could have denied it." His voice cracked. "Because Mr. Fallow always said honesty mattered. He'd be angry if I lied now." Marple gave the faintest nod, a small reflection in her gaze. She believed the boy's fear was real. But Slack pressed harder. "You worked closest with him. You knew his tools, his secrets. You had the chance." Lenny's lips trembled. "No, I wouldn't. I couldn't." The room fell silent, suspicion thick. Dolly clutched her husband's arm. The others avoided Lenny's eyes. Marple lowered her head slightly, her thought unspoken but clear in her look. Fear can make an innocent man appear guilty. Still the air tightened. The weight of doubt grew heavy. Slack broke the silence, his voice cold, cutting. "Maybe he faked more than you think." A burned string on the floor. The guests shifted uneasily. Inspector Slack kept his arms folded, his eyes still on Lenny. Marple, however, bent lower. Her gaze swept the workshop floor. She leaned closer to the edge of the dollhouse table. Her fingers paused. Something dark caught her eye. Thin, curled at the end. She pinched it gently. A short length of silk thread. The tip blackened, frizzled by fire. Dolly gasped softly. "What on earth is that, Jane?" Marple held it between finger and thumb, her tone calm. "Burned silk, nothing ordinary." Slack snorted. "Plenty of threads about. A place like this is full of scraps." But Marple shook her head slowly. "Number this has been singed, deliberately." Dr. Haydock bent forward. He adjusted his spectacles. Yes, the fibers are melted, not torn, burned. Mrs. Clement whispered to her husband. But why would silk be burned here? Marple answered without looking up. Because silk, when coated with beeswax, burns slowly, like a fuse. Silence fell. Eyes turned toward her. Even Slack stopped tapping his foot. Lenny's voice broke through. A fuse? You mean like to set off something? Marple nodded once. Exactly. A timed release. The kind that lets a roof fall when no one is near it. Dolly's hand flew to her mouth. You mean the roof that killed him? Marple met her eyes. The roof did not fall by chance. Mrs. Tarrant gave a sharp laugh. An absurd suggestion, overcomplication. The man worked with old fittings. Old things fail. Marple's voice stayed level. And yet this thread was placed, waxed, burned, measured to time and action. The Reverend frowned. Are you saying someone built a mechanism for murder? Marple did not answer him directly. Her eyes rested on the small chimney. Her fingers brushed the thread again. Someone made use of heat. A candle, perhaps. Wax on silk. Slow enough to give them distance, sure enough to give them cover. Slack's jaw tightened. You're chasing shadows, Miss Marple. A fuse in a dollhouse. Ridiculous. Marple folded the thread carefully. Her expression calm, but her eyes sharp. Sometimes shadows explain what light cannot. Lenny swallowed hard. I never touched it. I never saw that before. Marple gave him a small nod. I believe you. Dr. Haydock looked grim. It would take planning, careful planning. Mrs. Tarrant spoke coldly again. Or over-imagination. The simplest answer is usually correct. He worked too long. He made a mistake. Marple's lips pressed together. She slipped the thread into her handkerchief. Her voice dropped low. Accidents do not need fuses. The room went still. Every guest uneasy. Every face turned toward her. Her eyes rested on the dollhouse. Her voice a whisper, but heavy. This was no accident, she whispered. The key was not where it should be. The guests remained in silence. Inspector Slack scribbled notes. Colonel Bantry stood near the body, stiff. Dolly held her shawl close, uneasy. Marple's eyes were elsewhere. She looked toward the door, the same door they had forced open. She walked to it slowly. Her hand traced the frame. Her gaze fixed on the lock. She bent close. Her fingers brushed the keyhole. Small lines scratched the brass, faint, but clear enough for careful eyes. She spoke quietly. These marks, they were made from outside. Slack turned. What of it? We broke in, didn't we? Marple shook her head. These are not fresh. They are older. Someone locked this door from the outside, after Ambrose was already gone. Dolly gasped. You mean he wasn't alone? Marple nodded slightly. Indeed, he was locked in after death. The scene was arranged. Mrs. Clement clutched her husband's arm tighter. But why lock him in? What purpose does that serve? Marple replied calmly. To make it look impossible, a room sealed, an accident that could not be questioned. Dr. Haydock leaned in to inspect. She's right. The scratches aren't new. Someone used the key before the break-in. Lenny Pike shifted nervously. I never touched that lock. Never. Slack's tone hardened. Convenient. You were closest to him. You had the chance. Lenny's face turned pale. But I didn't. Why would I lock him in? Mrs. Tarrant's voice sliced through the room. Because it hides guilt. The guilty always think barriers will protect them. Marple studied her sharply, but said nothing. Instead, she focused on the key itself. It lay on the table where Slack had placed it earlier. She picked it up delicately. She held it to the light. The ridges were scratched, uneven, as though turned too many times, by too many hands. She lowered her voice. Ambrose did not fall beneath chance. Someone wanted us to believe so. This key tells us the truth. Colonel Bantry frowned. You mean the killer locked the door, then left calmly, knowing we would think it sealed from within? Marple gave a small nod. Yes, a false puzzle, a trick of perspective, nothing more. Slack's brow furrowed. He tapped his notebook with his pencil. So you say the locked door proves murder, not accident? Marple's eyes narrowed. Exactly. Someone staged the scene. Someone thought it would fool us. The guests stirred uneasily. Fear spread in their faces. The accident no longer seemed safe. It carried intent. Dolly whispered softly. How dreadful. To pretend an accident when it was planned all along. Marple's voice stayed quiet, reflective. Deceit often hides behind the ordinary, but it leaves its scratches behind. Her gaze lingered on the door. Her words cut the silence. Someone staged the scene. A glass almost lifted. Colonel Bantry shifted in his chair. The tension in the room weighed on him. He reached for his sherry, his fingers wrapped around the stem. Dolly spoke quickly. Arthur, perhaps not now. But he raised the glass anyway. The liquid trembled as he moved it. He brought it halfway to his lips. Then it slipped. His hand jolted. The glass tipped. Amber liquid spilled across the table. Everyone startled. Dolly gasped. Oh, look what you've done. The colonel muttered, embarrassed. Clumsy of me. Nerves, I expect. Dr. Haydock moved fast. He grabbed a napkin. Then he paused. His nose hovered over the wet patch. His brow furrowed. He sniffed once more. His voice turned grim. Almond. Bitter almond. The room froze. Every guest stared at the spilled drink. Mrs. Clement clutched her husband's arm. What does that mean? Haydock looked at her sharply. It means poison, likely cyanide, enough to kill. Slack straightened at once. Who poured it? Silence followed. All eyes turned to the decanter, still half full, glasses beside it. Dolly stammered. I poured them when we arrived, but I didn't notice anything wrong. Slack's tone hardened. Then someone tampered after, while we waited. Lenny's face drained of color. I never touched the drinks. I was near the dollhouse, not the table. Mrs. Tarrant's voice cut coldly. Convenient words, yet poison does not pour itself. Haydock placed the napkin down. Colonel Bantry, had you drunk, you would be gone already. The dose is strong. The colonel cleared his throat. I tell you it was clumsy hands, a mere accident. Marple's eyes fixed on the table. Her hands folded in her lap, her voice calm. Not an accident, an attempt, subtle, quick, nearly hidden, but an attempt nonetheless. Dolly's voice shook. You mean after Ambrose, someone tried again, to kill Arthur? Marple nodded slowly. The killer feared discovery. One witness too many, one suspicion too sharp. A second death would blur the trail. Slack's eyes narrowed. But who? Who had the chance? Marple did not answer him. Her gaze drifted from glass to guests, one by one. She read their faces in silence. Mrs. Clement whispered, This is dreadful. First Ambrose, now nearly another. The Reverend clasped her hand. God help us all. Lenny's hands shook openly now. I didn't do it. Please believe me, I didn't. Mrs. Tarrant stood straighter. Denials do not save the guilty. They only delay the truth. Marple finally looked up, her eyes steady, her voice clear. The glass tells us much. The poison was placed with purpose. But the hand behind it trembles now, for it has failed. She leaned slightly forward, her tone sharpened. The killer tried again. The dollhouse burns without flame. The group circled closer again. The spilled sherry still stained the table. The smell of almonds lingered faintly in the air. But Marple's attention had shifted. Her eyes moved back to the dollhouse. She leaned toward the miniature nursery. She raised her hand. Her fingers brushed lightly along the small chimney. She pulled back at once. Warmth. It pulsed faintly beneath her touch. She spoke softly. "It is warm again." Dolly blinked. "The chimney? But it's only decoration, surely." Marple shook her head. Number something burned within. Dr. Haydock stepped closer. "Let me see." He pressed his own hand against the chimney. His brow furrowed. "You're right. Heat remains. Odd, given the size." Slack frowned. "Some lamp wiring, perhaps." "Nothing strange." Marple ignored him. She peered down the narrow opening. Her eyes narrowed. "Not wiring, residue." She took a knitting pin from her bag. Slim, sharp. She eased it carefully into the chimney. Something scraped against it. She drew it out slowly. A flake clung to the tip. Black. Greasy. Soot melted together. Haydock examined it. "Burnt wax, candle wax, I'd say." Mrs. Clement gasped softly. "A candle? Inside a dollhouse? Why?" Marple did not answer. Her eyes returned to the opening. She tried again, prodding gently. This time something harder shifted. She angled the pin, then pulled. A bent metal piece slid out. Small. Twisted. A pin forced into place to hold something steady. It was now warped by heat. Lenny Pike's eyes widened. "That doesn't belong there? Not part of my work?" Slack's tone sharpened. "Then whose work is it? Who placed it?" No one answered. The silence grew heavier. Marple studied the bent pin, her voice calm. This held a thread, waxed silk, no doubt. A candle flame touched it. The thread burned slowly, long enough to set the roof free. Dolly's voice trembled. "You mean the dollhouse was turned into a trap?" Marple nodded. "Yes, a trap designed to fall at the right moment, timed, precise, and deadly." Mrs. Tarrant sniffed sharply. "Ridiculous, too complex, too fanciful. Who would build such a thing?" Marple glanced at her but said nothing. Her attention stayed fixed on the chimney. Colonel Bantry muttered under his breath, "Good Lord, murder by dollhouse." The Reverend shook his head. Wickedness hides in any form, even in toys. Marple folded the bent pin in her handkerchief, her eyes thoughtful, her voice quiet, reflective. Someone planned this, with patience, with care, not a sudden quarrel, not a careless slip, a design meant to kill. The others exchanged uneasy glances. Doubt, fear, suspicion circled them all. Marple's tone sharpened. This was no accident. It was built to happen. Her eyes stayed on the chimney. Her final words cut through the silence. This was a timed fuse. Too smooth, too rehearsed. Inspector Slack paced the workshop, his notebook open. His eyes moved from face to face. "Time of death," he said flatly. "Must be placed. We'll test your movements." Mrs. Tarrant stepped forward at once. Her chin lifted, her tone steady. "There's no need. I was with the group. You all know it. I spoke at length about restoration methods. I never left." Her words fell with confidence. Too quick, too certain. Mrs. Clement nodded. "Yes, she did. She explained about cataloging miniatures, about brass hinges, I think." The Reverend added quietly, "I recall her lecture. Quite exact." Miss Finch agreed. "She was speaking while the music played. I remember because I was timing the melody in my head." Slack jotted down the notes. "Very good. Solid support." Marple said nothing. Her gaze rested on the dollhouse. Her fingers tapped her bag lightly. Dolly whispered to her, "She sounds so sure, Jane. Do you believe her?" Marple did not answer yet. Her eyes stayed fixed on the chimney. Haydock cleared his throat. "She may be right. None of us saw her step away, and the mechanism burned unseen." Slack looked satisfied. "Then she's cleared. The fuse must have been burning long before. She couldn't have placed it." Marple finally spoke, her voice calm. Or exactly then. Slack frowned. What do you mean? She turned toward him, her eyes sharp. A waxed fuse burns slow. Minutes pass before release. A person can light it, then return to the group. No one notices, because the act is small. The waiting does the rest. The guests grew uneasy. Mrs. Clement gasped. You mean she could have lit it, then joined us? Marple gave a small nod. Yes. And what better alibi than a speech long and detailed, holding all attention while the fuse burned nearby? Mrs. Tarrant's lips tightened. She spoke coldly. You insult me, Miss Marple. I need no tricks to defend myself. Slack raised a hand. Enough. This is theory. She had witnesses. Marple's tone was steady. Too many, too exact. Alibis are rarely perfect. When they are, one must ask why. Lenny Pike's voice broke in. Mr. Fallow always said, no piece should look flawless. He said flaws prove truth. Marple's eyes softened slightly. She nodded toward him. He was right. Perfection, too smooth, often hides intent. The room fell silent again, each face unsettled. The certainty around Tarrant now looked brittle. Dolly whispered, Jane, you frighten me. To think even words can be staged. Marple answered gently, Fear not the words, Dolly. Fear the silence that follows them. Her gaze returned to Tarrant. Her voice sharpened. Her alibi is too perfect. Paper never lies. The room was heavy with unease, the air thick after Marple's words. But Miss Mabel Finch fidgeted, her hands rubbed nervously together. She spoke hesitantly. I may have something. Slack looked up sharply. Well, out with it. Her eyes dropped to the floor. It's about Mr. Fallow's order slips. I help record them sometimes. He brought one in last week, or so I thought. The Reverend frowned. What do you mean, you thought? Mabel swallowed. The slip said last week, but the paper itself. It was dated wrong, weeks earlier, long before this gathering. Dolly leaned closer. And what was the order for? Mabel's voice shook. Replacement garnets, small stones. For a brooch a silence fell. Every eye turned to her. Slack's pencil snapped against his pad. You're saying he already replaced the gems? Mabel nodded quickly. Yes, he must have noticed the switch weeks ago. The Ariadne brooch had already been tampered with, before tonight. Mrs. Clement gasped. Then this clue, this scrap we found, it means nothing? Marple spoke gently. It means someone wanted you to think the brooch was still inside, a false trail, a misdirection. Mrs. Tarrant's voice cut cold. Nonsense. Bills can be mistaken. Clerks can err. A simple error. Mabel shook her head. Number, I remember it clearly. The handwriting was Ambrose's. He was precise. He ordered replacements because he had found the real gems missing. He never said so, but I saw the look on his face. Colonel Bantry muttered. Then someone stole it already. He discovered it. And he was silenced before he could speak. Dr. Haydock's tone grew grim. That would mean his death wasn't only about a dollhouse. It was about keeping him quiet. Marple inclined her head. Exactly. And the scrap marked Chimney was meant to direct us away, to keep suspicion on the house, not on the thief. Lenny Pike looked stricken. So the brooch isn't here at all? All this fuss? And it was gone already? Marple gave him a small nod. Yes, Lenny. Gone long before the music played. Dolly whispered softly. Then poor Ambrose was trying to warn us, to leave some trace of the truth. Marple's eyes softened. He did. In his way. But paper reveals more than whispers. Paper records what memory cannot deny. Slack's face darkened. So the real crime was weeks ago. And tonight only tied up the threads. Marple folded her hands neatly. Her gaze fixed on the group. Exactly. Someone feared exposure, and someone staged an accident to bury the past. The guests shifted uneasily, trust fraying between them, eyes darting from one face to another. Marple's voice lowered, her tone steady. The brooch was not lost tonight. It was already gone. She let the silence linger. A quiet weight pressed over them. The brooch was already gone. In the handbag, truth hides. Inspector Slack stood firm. Everyone. Remains no one leaves. Mrs. Tarrant raised her chin. You overstep, Inspector. Slack ignored her tone. He gestured to her bag resting on the chair. Hand it here. Her eyes narrowed. You dare? Dolly whispered nervously. Oh, Jane, should he? Marple's quiet reply came. If she has nothing to fear, she will allow it. Reluctantly, Mrs. Tarrant lifted the handbag. She placed it down with deliberate care. Her lips pressed tight. Slack opened the clasp. The room leaned closer. Inside lay folded gloves, a lace handkerchief, a small notebook, and at the bottom, a narrow button hook, a set of fine miniature screwdrivers, and a cloth stained faintly gold. Dr. Haydock picked it up. He rubbed it between his fingers. Brass polish, he said firmly. Still fresh. Lenny Pike stammered. Those are the tools I use for the dollhouse fittings. Why would she? Slack cut him off. Because she used them to tamper with the stays, to prepare the trap. Mrs. Tarrant's voice grew sharp. I collect antiques. I restore them. Tools prove nothing. Marple's eyes settled on her hands. She spoke softly. May I? Without waiting, she stepped closer. She lifted Mrs. Tarrant's left hand gently, her gaze fixed on one finger, a dark patch, a mark at the edge of the nail, burned skin. Marple released her hand slowly, then spoke in a low, certain tone. You lit the candle. The room stilled. No one spoke. Every eye fixed on Mrs. Tarrant. Mrs. Clement shuddered. Dear heaven. Then she truly... The Reverend placed a hand on his wife's arm. He had no words. Lenny backed away slightly. His voice shook. It wasn't me. It wasn't me all along. Slack's jaw tightened. His pencil snapped in half. Enough pretense. The truth is here in your bag. Mrs. Tarrant drew a long breath. Her face did not break. Her eyes stayed hard. I restore what men ruin. A mark on my nail proves nothing. Marple's voice was quiet but final. Marks do not lie. Tools do not lie. You lit the fuse. The dollhouse did the rest. Dolly whispered to Marple. Oh, Jane, how did you see it so clearly? Marple gave a faint, reflective smile. Because guilt leaves its traces in small things. A thread, a pin, a burn on a finger. The room was heavy with silence. The truth pressed down on them all. Marple folded her hands together again, her words calm, her eyes steady. She lit the candle. Words from the dead. Inspector Slack rummaged through Ambrose's desk. Drawers opened, papers shuffled, receipts, invoices, old letters. Then his hand paused. A sealed envelope rested beneath a ledger. Bold letters marked the front. If anything happens to me. Slack's eyes sharpened. He held it up. This is it. Dolly leaned forward. Oh, Arthur, listen to that. Like something from a novel. Colonel Bantry frowned. This is no novel. This is death. Slack broke the seal. He unfolded the paper slowly. Inside were several photographs, black and white images. Each one showed the Ariadne brooch. He spread them across the table. The group leaned closer. The first image showed the brooch intact. The second showed faint scratches on the clasp. The third showed missing stones. And the last substituted garnets, dull and lifeless. Dr. Haydock muttered. He knew. He had evidence. Slack lifted another slip from the envelope. Ambrose's writing, sharp and neat. The brooch has been altered. A false set of stones. I believe the thief fears discovery. If I die, Look to this name." Beneath the words was a single line, a name written in black ink. Sybil Tarrant. The room fell silent. No one moved. Mrs. Clement's hand flew to her mouth. The Reverend stared at the table, shaken. Lenny Pike whispered, almost to himself. He wrote it down. He knew who. Dolly turned wide eyes to Marple. "Jane, this proves it, doesn't it? Plain as day?" Marple's gaze stayed on the photographs, her voice quiet. "Proof is rarely plain, but it speaks clearly enough." Slack's voice hardened. "Well, Mrs. Tarrant, what do you say now?" All eyes turned to her. Her hands gripped the edge of the chair, her knuckles white. Her breath quick, though she tried to steady it. She forced a thin smile. "Forgery, a dying man's confusion. Photographs can be altered. Names can be written by any hand." Marple's tone was measured. Ambrose was precise, his records exact. He left these not by chance, but by intention. Mrs. Tarrant's lips trembled slightly. She turned her gaze away. Colonel Bantry spoke firmly. Only one person had reason to silence him, the one he named. The Reverend added quietly, "Even the dead bear witness when they leave words behind." Marple's eyes softened for a moment. A man who feared betrayal made sure the truth would remain. Even if his voice was silenced, his pen would endure. The photographs lay in stark order, the name on the page clear as iron. Sybil Tarrant. The room's weight pressed on her. Her proud face faltered. Her posture stiffened, but her color drained. Her breath caught. Her mask broke for the first time. Tarrant froze, pale. She wanted fear, not death. The room was silent, all eyes fixed on Mrs. Tarrant, her face pale, her posture rigid. At last she spoke, her voice cold, but trembling at the edges. "I did not mean to kill him. You must understand. I only wished to frighten Ambrose, nothing more." Dolly gasped. "Frighten? But why?" Mrs. Tarrant lifted her chin. "He was reckless. He sought to expose me, to humiliate me before collectors and scholars. I could not allow it." Lenny Pike stepped back, horrified. "You set it up? You made the house into a trap." Mrs. Tarrant's eyes narrowed. "I wanted him shaken enough to stop, not dead." Marple's voice came quiet, steady. "Number not shaken. You weakened the brass stays deliberately. You polished them to fail. You measured the fuse to fall with precision." Mrs. Tarrant's hands clenched. "You twist it. I misjudged. That is all." Marple shook her head gently. "Mistakes do not bend pins into place. Mistakes do not burn silk to time a release. You calculated every detail. The roof was not meant to scare him. It was meant to kill." Mrs. Clement shivered. How dreadful. To sit with us, to speak so calmly, and to know. Her husband put an arm around her, his face grave. It shows how far pride can reach. Dr. Haydock spoke firmly. "You gambled with his life. You lost. And you call it misjudgment." Mrs. Tarrant snapped back. "Do you think Ambrose was innocent? He threatened me. He said he would ruin me. He left me no choice." Colonel Bantry scowled. "No one deserves death over reputation." Marple's eyes did not leave her. "You feared more than ruin. You feared shame. You feared the world seeing your collection as false, and you silenced the one man who dared to reveal it." Mrs. Tarrant's voice cracked for the first time. "You do not understand. My life's work, my name, all I built, it would have turned to dust." Marple's gaze softened, but her words stayed sharp. "Better dust than blood. You chose pride over mercy, and you chose murder." The Reverend bowed his head. "A soul willing to deceive is already lost, but one who kills to preserve a lie falls further still." Dolly whispered to Marple, "Oh, Jane, how terrible, to kill over stones and pride." Marple gave a faint nod. Terrible indeed, But pride blinds. It convinces one that reputation outweighs life itself. Slack stepped forward, his face set hard. He reached for his cuffs. The room held its breath, every eye on him, every ear waiting for his word. Slack gripped his cuffs. Greed weighs more than brass. Inspector Slack stepped forward, his cuffs ready in his hand. His voice was hard. "Sybil Tarrant, you are under arrest." Mrs. Tarrant did not move. Her eyes flashed once, then dimmed. She sat rigid in her chair. Dolly whispered, "Oh, Arthur, it's really happening." Colonel Bantry gave a slow nod. "Justice has to." Slack continued. "Your motive is clear. You feared Ambrose would expose you. You replaced the brooch with a false set. You thought no one would notice. But he did." Dr. Haydock added, "And you silenced him with a fuse and flame, a cold calculation, not an accident." Mrs. Clement shivered, her voice low. To kill for jewels, for reputation, how dreadful. Her husband answered quietly, "It is more than jewels. It is vanity, vanity dressed as pride." Lenny Pike looked torn. His hands trembled. "I worked beside him every day. He never told me. If I had known, maybe I could have—" His voice broke. He could not finish. Marple's eyes softened toward him. "Do not blame yourself, Lenny. Some secrets are hidden too deeply, even from those near." Slack reached down. He pulled Mrs. Tarrant to her feet. Her face was pale but stiff. She did not resist. "You will answer for Ambrose's death," Slack said, "and for the theft that led to it." She spoke at last, her tone bitter. "You think me wicked, but all of you collect. All of you admire what I show. None of you questioned how I obtained it." The Reverend's voice was firm. "Temptation may touch us all, but murder is not temptation. It is choice." Mrs. Tarrant's eyes flickered. For a moment her pride slipped. Her shoulders sagged. Dolly whispered to Marple. "How could she do it? For stones?" Marple answered softly. "Not for stones, Dolly. For the image they carried, for the reputation built upon them. Greed was only the shadow. Pride was the weight." Haydock exhaled deeply. Ambrose died because he was honest. Marple looked toward the covered body, her voice low. "Yes, he chose truth, and truth cost him his life." Slack pulled the cuffs tighter. "Time to end this charade." The guests watched in silence, faces pale, hearts uneasy. Mrs. Tarrant raised her chin one final time, her voice hollow. "Then let history call me guilty. At least history will still call my name." Colonel Bantry muttered, "A name built on lies is no name at all." Marple's gaze lingered on her, her tone quiet, reflective. History remembers greed, but it also remembers the lesson left behind. She turned slightly toward the group, her eyes calm, but her words carried weight. "One lesson remains. A dollhouse for children, a trap for pride." The guests slowly gathered their things. No one spoke freely. The room felt heavy. Dolly sat back, her hands trembling. She stared at the empty teacup before her. Her voice broke the silence. "It was the most dreadful tea I have ever had." Colonel Bantry patted her arm. He tried to soothe, but his own face was strained. He had no words of comfort. Dr. Haydock closed his case. Death steals appetite, and justice rarely tastes sweet. Mrs. Clement whispered to her husband, "I thought it was only a gathering, a dollhouse, a curiosity, but it became horror." He nodded quietly. Even small things hold darkness. Lenny Pike stood apart, his head bowed. "I worked beside him every day. I never guessed. He trusted me, and I could do nothing to save him." Marple's voice reached him gently. "Do not burden yourself, Lenny." Ambrose faced more than skill could stop. He faced greed sharpened into weapon. Inspector Slack spoke briskly. The rest will be handled by the law. Statements, records, reports. The truth is written clear now. But Marple shook her head softly. The truth is never so clear, Inspector, not to the heart. Dolly looked at her friend. Then what do you see, Jane? What is the lesson here? Marple folded her hands in her lap. Her eyes lowered in quiet thought. She spoke with calm weight. Beauty is meant to delight, yet greed twists it. A dollhouse was built to charm children, to remind us of innocence, but in prideful hands it became a snare, a machine of death. The Reverend added gently, Evil often wears the mask of the ordinary. Marple gave a faint nod, and pride blinds. Mrs. Tarrant feared shame more than guilt. She believed reputation worth more than life, and so she chose to kill. Dolly sighed deeply. It chills me, Jane, all of it. I'll never look at a toy the same way. Marple's eyes softened. Do not fear toys, Dolly. Fear only the hands that turn joy into weapons. Fear the heart that sees possession as power. Silence lingered. The group slowly drifted toward the door, Slack at the front, his prisoner behind. The Bantrys close together, the Clements subdued, Lenny quiet, carrying sorrow. Marple remained seated. Her gaze rested once more on the dollhouse, its miniature rooms perfect, yet empty. She spoke softly, almost to herself. Even the smallest house can hold the weight of human vanity, and even the finest treasure can turn cruel when guarded by greed. Dolly touched her arm. Come, Jane, let us go home. Marple rose, her steps slow, her expression unreadable, but her final words stayed with them all. Some treasures kill those who guard them.